Hello and welcome to J&B Talk F1 this week, Wednesday the 15th. Oh, sorry, it's Thursday. Forgot about that. We didn't upload anything yesterday. Yes, it's Thursday the 15th of October 2015. And this week we've not got too much for you, but it's pretty juicy in terms of content. Well, we will be discussing anyway. We'll be rounding up the Russian Grand Prix, first of all, which was run and done over the weekend. But the majority of the episode is going to focus on the both of us recounting our little road trip last week to New South Wales, Sydney, and of course the V8 Supercars Bathurst 1000. And Baden Westerweller, as always, joining me, and I'm pretty sure you're excited to recount our little adventure.
Oh, it's hard to believe already that the best part of a week is come and gone. It was a whirlwind couple of days on the road, couple of days visiting the Sydney CBD, 2 days trackside, then ended up being straight back on the road the next day and back into the working week, you could say, ever since then. And it's really hard to think that it was only 4 days ago, but it has passed very rapidly. And the thoughts really from that weekend, that they're still taking a while to sink in, just that experience.
Pretty much. And we'll get more into that later. But as always, I'm Jawad Yaqub, and the Russian Grand Prix, first of all. And with 4 races to go now sorry, not 4, yeah, 4 races.
Yeah.
We've been so out of tune with F1 for the last week that I don't even know how many races are left. This is just poor form, I guess. But yeah, with 4 races to go in 2015, is there anyone out there who can topple Lewis Hamilton? Who knows? Probably not. Nico Rosberg got pole position, but a throttle issue during the race forced him to retire, and seemingly takes him out of the championship picture now that he's 73 points behind his teammate. But otherwise, could you say, Baden, that we were deprived of that long-awaited battle between Rosberg and Hamilton? Both of them seemed very racy at the start, and if it wasn't for that the throttle issue that Rosberg had, would we have seen these two fight tooth and nail for the rest of the race?
Oh, it was Rosberg's last opportunity. You could see that he was laying it all on the line. Ultimately, it came to a fairly short, abrupt conclusion there. But for Hamilton, he always does tend to start a bit slower and work his way in around those pit stops. So it's fair to say that we could have expected Lewis to romp away to victory, but it was made so much easier by Rosberg's early demise. And as it stands now, really, Rosberg, he's a mathematical prospect now, and you get to the point almost where they'd be the top brass there. Toto Wolff and Niki Lauda and Paddy Lowe will be asking the German to support Hamilton's bid to have that title, just to get it over the line rather than risking any kind of catastrophe. With the outside prospect, Sebastian Vettel, who is in fact now ahead of Rosberg in the standings.
Pretty much so, and it was another 1-2 between Hamilton and Vettel. Vettel pretty much drove faultlessly to second and had no problems along the way. Hamilton also another imperious drive, not to be challenged by anyone else, but the majority of the action, as always, went on behind those two. First of all, the battle for third was quite hotly contested, and we had a number of contenders in that battle, none other than Sergio Perez and Daniel Ricciardo, who've went on to bold strategies, having opted for longer stints on the soft tyres. They pitted very early. I think it must have been during one of the safety cars. There were 2 safety cars in this race, and get rid of those super softs and get on the softs and go straight to the end. And unfortunately for Daniel Ricciardo, he retired with suspension problems, so he would have definitely been in that hunt with Perez for the podium. But after Ricciardo's retirement, it was the 2 Finns that were challenging the Mexican, and that was Valtteri Bottas and Kimi Räikkönen. Räikkönen and Bottas were able to get past Perez after his tyres just let go. But in a last-ditch effort, Räikkönen on the final lap tries to squeeze past Bottas, and both of them seemingly off the track. And one of them out of the points, Kimi Räikkönen cops a post-race time penalty. So instead of finishing 5th where he did, limping home to the line, he finished in 8th instead.
All in all, it was a bit of a clumsy, ham-fisted effort by the elder Finn there, but you can't blame him really for throwing it on the line there. He's wanting to clearly impress Ferrari's been re-signed for 2016, but he wants to be up there. And for Bottas, you can understand his sentiments, because clearly it's been a bit of a disappointing campaign for Williams, and that was another shot at a rare podium as it's been this campaign gone wanting.
Yeah, and both Finns in the end blaming each other for the incident. Clearly, despite being countrymen, they're not the bestest of friends. But another podium for Sergio Perez with Force India. Of course, we saw that maiden podium last season for this pairing at the Bahrain Grand Prix, and now this B-Spec car has yielded another good result for Sergio Perez ahead of Nico Hülkenberg. It must be said, Hülkenberg still yet to score a podium in Formula One, but yeah, we'll talk a little bit about Hülkenberg in a sec. But behind all the carnage, we saw the likes of Danny Kvyat, Felipe Nasr, and Pastor Maldonado boosted up the order in their final position. So good points for all of them. Good for Kvyat for his home race to finish fifth. It was Nasser in sixth, more points for Sauber, and of course Pastor Maldonado picking up the points as well at a time where it is crucial for Lotus. But it has to be said the drive of the day perhaps might be the man who finished in fourth place, and that was Felipe Massa. Starting from 15th on the grid, Williams opted to start him on the soft tyres instead of the super softs, and he was able to go pretty long into that stint, and in the end on the super soft tyres, and was able to get into fourth and had a reasonable, about 10 seconds over Kvyat in fifth. So if you agree with that, Baden, or did you have another driver in mind?
No, it's hard to argue with this, really. He did look a bit dejected on that Saturday, and ultimately, although Bottas had his last collision, this went some way to recompensing that setback. And for the Brazilian, he continues to show that he hasn't lost that edge, really. He extracted the maximum from that rubber, and really, he's a man who, I don't know, he could get on the top of the podium one day. We saw him at Britain, Silverstone earlier this year. It didn't quite come off, but he's still a force to be reckoned with.
And this just goes back to what you were saying about Bottas and Williams not having the most best season this year compared to what it was last year. You know, are we seeing an emergence? Perhaps, you know, Massa has taken over from Bottas, as impressive as Bottas was last year and still is to an extent. You know, perhaps, you know, all this hype about him is starting to disappear.
Certainly for the Finn, he needs to up his game again for 2016 if he wants to have that elusive jolt up the grid, whether it's to Ferrari or to Mercedes. They'd be the most likely candidates for a move. He all that hype when he was pretty much across the line for that Maranello berth earlier this season. It's almost been vindicated, you could say, these past few races that they've retained Raikkonen, because Bottas, while he was unlucky on Sunday not to enjoy that third place, he's still across the season. He's not been convincing, and Massa's really been keeping him honest the entire way.
Exactly, and that sort of hits back at the critics about Felipe Massa as well, saying that he's been outdone by his younger teammate. But this year they have really been nip and tuck, those two, and it's very interesting to see, you know, what the feedback is to that.
Oh, absolutely. I think for next season, Massa, who knows? He's got that 1 year deal, but he could race beyond that, really, if he shows that this isn't just some kind of a temporary upturn in form. And there have even been calls in the past as well. He would have been better suited to going back to Ferrari, would you believe it or not? I don't know if that'd ever come off, but surely if they have a competitive package, the Williams next season, that's a bit more in line with what we had expected this pre-season heading into Melbourne, there's every chance that he could be the one taking out the honours for them.
Indeed so, and only 3 points between those two in the championship. Bottas currently sitting fifth and Massa in sixth. So, you know, that battle may not be decided until the final race in Abu Dhabi. But moving it on, we had Max Verstappen again putting in a stellar drive after the incident that occurred on the first lap at the second corner. Nico Hülkenberg had a bit of a spin on the AstroTurf and collected the innocent Marcus Ericsson. Both were out, but Verstappen sustained a puncture it was, and from there he really fought back to finish 10th. And that 10th only came because Fernando Alonso in the end copped a penalty after the race for abusing track limits, and otherwise it would have been a double points finish for McLaren. Jenson Button finishing 9th in the end. So great stuff there for McLaren, but just the penalty for Alonso in the end took away that crucial point.
I guess it's all quite academic to both parties, McLaren and Alonso. They're fighting for 1 point. It's going to make very little difference to the outlook of their campaign come December. Really, next season is where it's all at, and that's if they do indeed make it there, these two, and their second partnership, really. For Button, obviously, it's a bit of a morale booster. He enjoyed a much better Saturday, it has to be said, where he did line up 13th. It's hard to really say that's some kind of huge result for them, but in the context of their campaign, it's quite solid inroads, and it's cause for optimism that next season that they might make not a quantum leap, but it will be one which is in line with pretty much 2017 and beyond. They can have a good springboard to perhaps be at the forefront of victory once again.
Well, they're going to have to, aren't they, considering what we discussed last week and the week before about Mana Marussia and then Haas even. You know, McLaren could potentially be the new backmarkers next season if they don't increase their game and try and match where Haas or Mana Marussia will be next season. So onus is on them, of course, but we've already talked about the Hulkenberg and Ericsson collision on the first lap. That brought out the safety car. The second safety car was brought out by a heavy impact sustained by Roman Grosjean at turn 3. It was a pretty nasty shunt, and it seemed like he went over the marbles, and that just spun him. And luckily the driver was unharmed, but yeah, as we said, one Lotus in the points with Maldonado, but probably the biggest shunt of the weekend came during the third practice session, and that was involving Carlos Sainz, and that was a 46G collision in the end, and he was taken off to hospital, and it was pretty uncertain whether he raced or not, but believe it or not, he was cleared to race. So we saw him running up as high as P7 at one point before a brake failure in the end took him out of the race. So if he was able to finish the race and in the points, he would have definitely been driver of the day, wouldn't he?
Oh, absolutely. I count his blessing. He emerged unscathed and was able to race at least. Another race chalked up for him, a bit more experience the first time around at this circuit. And looking in hindsight now, it has emerged the last day or two that he reported that he was feeling dizziness behind that initial safety car, and we've seen Joe Sayward come out and question the wisdom of passing the Spaniard to line up on the grid on the Sunday, having had this stint in hospital overnight. And obviously nothing sinister came of it on that Sunday, despite that little spin he did have with the failure. But he's come out unscathed, so you can't ask for too much more.
But yeah, Joe Sayward did bring up a valid point about concussion and everything, considering what we saw earlier, in the pre-season with Fernando Alonso having sustained that concussion at Barcelona, and then subsequently he had to miss the first race so he could respect the recovery period, because the effects of the concussion perhaps won't come immediately, but perhaps might be felt in the following days or whatever. So I guess he made a fair point then in questioning the safety of it. But if Sainz is fine now, then it's all good. But at the same time, you can't blame him for being too cautious, can you?
Oh, absolutely. Sainz, you can understand he's a young driver. He's chomping at the bit to get behind the wheel at every opportunity. But if it arises in the future, would be sensible just to restrain him, really. In the context of the future, the long-term picture, he's got so much potential there. As we did see, ultimately, if he had this really starting at the rear or starting in pit lane and he ends up P7 and until those dying laps, who knows what he could achieve when he's got a car that's even more handy than the current Toro Rosso.
Indeed so, and we hope that he, along with all the Red Bull sponsored drivers, have a car indeed to drive next season. That's still unresolved as it is at the moment, but we hope to talk more about that next week. Good result for Roberto Merri, it has to be said, upon his return to the Mana squad. There's probably only one more race left for him to contest in the place of Alexander Rossi, and he finished P13 ahead of his teammate Will Stevens, finished a lap ahead, and despite starting behind him due to a penalty it was as well. So it seems nothing is cutting it for Will Stevens at the moment. He was trounced by Alexander Rossi in the previous two races, and now Merry, who's been out of an F1 car for a couple of weeks, has come back and done the same.
Well, Mary and Rossi would make a very logical combination on the face of this result. It's a surprise unless there's some kind of a stipulation in the Britain's contract that he must participate in all events. And Mary and Rossi really have outshone Will Stevens for the large part. We saw initially Stevens had the upper hand of Mary, but as soon as that the Spaniard came to grips with the car, he's outshone his more highly fancied teammate there. And for him to only be lining up once more across the next four events and only once in the past three, Mary can count himself very hard done by. And you've got to look out. He could be a contender for next season on the grid full time again, alongside even Rossi, though we've heard the rumours of a Haryanto or a Pascal Wehrlein, that he's certainly someone who can't be dismissed.
Indeed so, and obviously Rossi will be coming back to resume the duties over there at the next Grand Prix, which will be his home Grand Prix in Austin. So a big reception it'll be there for him in front of all the North American supporters, and we wish him best of luck. And just whilst we're on Alexander Rossi and the GP2 series, if we will, Stoffel Vandoorne finally wrapped up the GP2 championship over the weekend at Sochi, so want to congratulate him. And he seems pretty confident that he is close to getting an F1 drive for 2016. So it'll be great to see if him on the grid, if he gets a competitive drive. As we said a couple of weeks ago, that link to the ART team boss, Frederick Vasseur, who actually in recent days, a former F1 driver, Olivier Panis, said that Vasseur would be the best man to lead Renault if they were to re-enter F1 alongside Alain Prost as well. So perhaps, Vasseur could bring someone like Stoffel Vandoorne to Formula One and in that seat with Renault. So we already discussed this before, but still no word on Renault. But if they do come, then you'd think by joining the dots that could happen. But more stranger things have happened anyway.
Oh, absolutely. It would be a shame to see him miss out for another 12 months. But we've got Jenson Button's retention at McLaren, and it would seem certain that Alonso is going to stick around for at least one more campaign. And looking on the face of it, that Renault link is the logical one. And if anyone for the past few years, that crop of GP2 champions who have had to content themselves without a reserve role, precious little time behind the wheel, it's got to be Stoffel Vandoorne.
Pretty much so, and you saw Jolyon Palmer a bit hard done, last year's champion, and then 2012's champion as well, Davide Valsecchi as well, when he was drafted into Lotus. It seems that Lotus seemed to shaft their reserve drivers or ex-GP2 champions, and it just reminds me of when Kimi Raikkonen elected to end his season early in 2013 to get the back surgery done, and instead of drafting in Davide Valsecchi, the third driver who should be in that seat, they brought in Heikki Kovalainen instead, and nothing was yielded from Kovalainen's efforts anyway. So you can understand why Valsecchi's decided to hang the helmet up with Lotus, and now is working for Sky Italy. So still good to see him around the paddock, working in a media capacity. I remember seeing him this year at the Grand Prix as well, and looked very happy in that role. But clearly as a driver, you don't want to sit on the sidelines. You want to be racing. Same sentiment is shared by Kevin Magnussen too, who I guess if we were to talk about predictions or whatever, I'd say he probably will end up at Haas. Vandoorne, ideally, if the Renault deal comes through, could be Renault's second driver. So watch the space, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Both of them deserve their seat, but we've got a fair bit to play, I guess, until any announcement is made there. But we need to really return our attention to the man of the moment with Lewis Hamilton there. We can see now it hasn't taken him long. He and Sebastian Vettel now neck and neck, one clear of Senna, each on 42 victories.
Pretty much so, and some interesting comments being made about these two recently in just the past week or whatever, saying that um, Hamilton and Vettel next year with the with equal cars pretty much, Ferrari can catch up. Could be like the Senna versus Mansell rivalry back in the 80s and early 90s. So that'll be good to see. It'll be good for the sport to see two drivers battle that way, because this year has been a bit of a fizzer with Rosberg not really on par with Hamilton at all. And as we said before, 73 points behind Hamilton. If he's more than 75 points behind Hamilton at the conclusion of the United States Grand Prix, then that's championship over. We see Vettel with 66 points in deficit to Hamilton. There is, I guess, mathematically a chance, but what is the likeliness of that happening?
I'd require Hamilton to endure one of the setbacks which Rosberg seems to have endured quite frequently at the past few events. And as it is for Sebastian Vettel, if he could end up second in this year's standings, that'd be a great takeaway considering how far Ferrari have been coming from that base and the expectations 12 months ago, and really to propel him for a legitimate bid to the 2016 title, probably another 12 months ahead of the realistic expectations for a rebuild that normally takes multiple campaigns. He's very much in a position where, with the improvements to the chassis and an upgraded power unit for next season, he's probably going to be right up there with Hamilton as equal favourite.
Very much so, and that's what I was saying about the press talking about resurrecting the whole Senna versus Mansell rivalry, Hamilton versus Vettel. That'll be something good to see, of course. But one thing that we haven't discussed yet, which probably is an important thing, the penalty that was given to Kimi Raikkonen took a few points away from him, and as a result, those points were enough to grant Mercedes-AMG their second consecutive Constructors' Championship. And ironically enough, 12 months ago at the Russian Grand Prix, that was where they secured their first championship, the Constructors one. And here we are again at the Russian Grand Prix, back-to-back championships. And really, you've got to admire the effort and everything that's gone on in that team, not just, going back to last year, but the years, leading up to 2014, the new regulations, Ross Brawn gathering all the personnel, Lewis Hamilton, Paddy Lowe, the list just goes on and on. So quick word about that would be...
Well, again, I think it's hard to not go over it without sounding too much of a fan, but with Michael Schumacher there too, he put in a lot of the grunt work in those initial campaigns, and Nico Rosberg too, though he's been outshone by Lewis since pretty much 2014 and beyond. He was there initially in the Genesis, and Ross Brawn too. We saw Hamilton mention him after the Sunday result, but they can't be overstated enough how much they put all these pieces together to enjoy this success. And obviously they would have hoped for a 1-2 on the day, so if they can do it at the next race, we might see the real celebrations come then, since it was only the Raikkonen penalty which allowed them a bit of a late notice of this securing their second consecutive title.
Very much so, and still, the champagne would have been flowing in the team, so it'll allow them now to rest easy a little bit in terms of picking up the points. But it was never really in doubt anyway, considering how far back Ferrari were. They wouldn't have had as many wins. Ferrari wouldn't have had as many wins as the Silver Arrows anyway. So, but then again, it's nice to see, they've continued building on that momentum, and yeah, they really are a force to be reckoned with. Perhaps, next year, if they can continue this sort of form, comparisons will be drawn up to, the dominance of McLaren in 88 and 89, or perhaps even the early 2000s with Ferrari as well, something that you're really, you got a lot of knowledge in, considering the Schumacher background.
Yeah, absolutely. As much as have to be said we share the sentiment that Lewis Hamilton isn't our most desired driver. You've got to admire him and the entire operation. Clearly, they run like clockwork, and there's no signs at the moment, apart from these few reliability glitches which have crept in, to suggest that they're going to be falling down the grid anytime soon.
Very much so, and quickly we better move it on now. Time is running a little against us, but yeah, now time to recount. We're going to spend the rest of this edition recounting our little trip up to New South Wales, Sydney, Penrith, and then ultimately the Bathurst 1000, the biggest V8 supercar race of the year, and it has been for many years as well. So, you know, what I guess you were talking about it before, Baden, how it still hasn't sunk in yet that only 3-4 days ago we were over there, biggest motorsport event in Australia, I guess next to the Australian Grand Prix for Formula One and even MotoGP. But the place, you know, the mountain, it just has its own sort of aura that you don't realize until you're there. You can't really see it on TV or in a video game.
Oh, absolutely. It's just a bit of a surreal sensation once you enter the outside of the circuit. Then once you really enter that paddock and you immerse yourself amongst that the action, the adrenaline, you can see everyone's really just their the atmosphere. It's just turned up tenfold on what you would see at a standard event. Even Sandown, which we attended about a month ago, that was clearly the first in enduro as part of that mini championship within a championship as it is the Pertec Enduro Cup. But this one, really, everyone on edge, and you've got the classic characters, of course, which you hear all about on television as it is with the Bogans as they are top of the hill. We didn't quite get that far, but we did get up partway up Conrod Straight, and certainly they lived up to their reputation on that front as well.
Well, we encountered enough of those characters anyway at that little Cooper's bar that was overlooking Conrod Strait and the Chase. So I can't imagine what it would have been like if we head up to the top of the mountain, perhaps McPhillamy Park or even Skyline. So perhaps we wouldn't have made it out there alive, but maybe next time we'll consider it. But yeah, otherwise, you know, as you were saying, the paddock as well, having that paddock access, you know, it's an inexpensive thing, but in terms of what you get out of that paddock access is just you know, there's no value. You can't really put a value to it, as in you couldn't really put a price on it. You know, you can get in there, you can see what the teams are doing in the garages, the drivers as well. You can bump into them. I think I got a photo actually of Craig Lowndes going into the Portaloo or whatever. It was just accidental. I didn't know it was in, but yeah. Sorry?
Candid moment caught on camera, and eventually, as it were, you got a picture of the man relieving himself before arguably a stint which put him in position to claim his sixth crown. So it's one really just you can talk about in years down the track.
Pretty much so. I mean, that just Lowndes winning. You know, who better to win the race than Craig Lowndes, the people's champion, and he really does get the crowd buzzing. And as we saw, you know, before the podium ceremony, we were able to see all the fans running onto the track trying to get into underneath the podium. We just stayed on the hill opposite the podium, but we still got a pretty good view. But yeah, just, you know, the people that adore him, you know, it's fantastic. And I think for our first Bathurst experience, I wouldn't have rathered anyone else than Lowndes to win, because he's such a legendary figure, as you say, and he's just got this he's got his own presence about him, which is just you know, he's going to go down in V8 folklore.
Yeah, he just transcends the paddock, just like Peter Brock and Dick Johnson, Alan Moffat, drivers of that sort of ilk. Really, he can't be begrudged by anybody. Even the Ford fans are fond of him from his time there. And then the HRT too. He won all of his titles to date with them, going way back to the commencement of his V8 days. But really, as far as characters go, there's none more affable and cheerful, regardless of the predicament he might be in, than Craig Lowndes himself. So to see him at the top of the podium, it really was quite special.
Yeah, very much so. And on the podium, he was joined by Mark Winterbottom and his co-driver Steve Owen. And I guess both Lowndes and Winterbottom during that race had a lot of work to do, seeing as they started 14th and 15th on the grid. And yeah, they were the ones who ended up at the top. Winterbottom, I guess, had that black flag. Mechanical black flag shown for I think it was a telemetry issue they had, and then they had to take a penalty. So a tough day for Pro Drive as well. In with Chaz Mostert's accident, obviously the on the Friday we weren't trackside that day, but when we did find out, I think we were at the Belgian Beer Cafe. It was, and that's when we found out, and it was very horrific to see. And we wish Chaz, you know, uh, speedy recovery and everything. He's out for these. He's out for the rest of the year now, getting that broken leg mended. So yeah, we wish him a speedy recovery. I mean, no matter which team no matter which team the drivers are with, whether it's Holden, Ford, or any of the other manufacturers, HRT, Triple Eight, we all don't want to see that happen to any of the drivers. Same with Formula One.
Oh, absolutely. When you hear about it, when you're not really even viewing on TV, it's hard to comprehend that the magnitude of that crash. And when you did see it finally, it struck home how close it did come to being really the worst possible outcome. And these sentiments are echoed by Mostert himself. He really was counting his blessings to come away as it was with relatively minor injuries in the circumstances, and he can just really turn his full attentions to coming back bigger and better in 2016. And even for FPR, it's almost a blessing in disguise. Or should stop saying that. At Pro Drive, they can focus their full attentions really now on Mark Winterbottom and staving off the challenges it now seems from Craig Lowndes, who now will take the lead role there since Jamie Whincup had his issues on Sunday, which has put him really out of any chance of defending for a 5th consecutive title.
What did he do again? I think he ignored the team when they said, "Oh, don't overtake this safety car," and you just don't do that. You don't overtake the safety car when the car's lights are still on. So, bit of a rookie. It sounds like a bit of a rookie error, to be honest. Being made by the 6-time series champion, you wouldn't expect him to do that, would you?
Well, even Craig Lowndes came out and gave him a gentle rebuke in the days following, even when he was the victor there. He clearly sees thinking from the team's perspective, and he was very much in contention. Whincup alongside Paul Dumbrell. They'd been having a sterling outing until that point, and really, just when you think back to 12 months ago and how close they did come after his continual denials to David Couch's pretty much demand, as it was in the end, to come in and have that splash and dash. I don't know whether this ego tag which has been applied to him is fully warranted, but the point is that he's won 6 titles, but he's still got an employer, and the interests of the team, really, they're the ones calling the shots there. And you couldn't blame the top brass there if they're going to start getting to a point where they're going to have some serious chats with Jamie Whincup, just to remind him who is the boss there. And I don't know, if it's going to get to a point where it's ugly and they have to move on, both parties have been together for a long time. They've enjoyed a lot of success, but perhaps they're just getting to a point where they're just wearing out. And seeing Craig Lowndes now, he'll be at the forefront of their title bid.
Pretty much so, and he's about 400 points behind Winterbottom as it stands. And they can really focus in on him now to try and get that title. It's been a long time between drinks for Craig Lowndes in terms of the championship. As he was saying before, all his championships came with HRT back how long ago? More than 15 years ago, I'd say.
Yeah, 96, 98, 99. So yeah, it's pretty much, we're talking the best part of 2 decades.
Yeah, so there you go. I mean, the long time between drinks for him, and as I was saying before, the awe, the presence of fans, when Lowndes wins, even just a race is so good, good for the sport. So he really is the people's champion. But rounding out the podium in the end was Garth Tander and Warren Luff for the Holden Racing team. And I guess the best part of seeing the Holden Racing team this weekend was those cool liveries that they were running for promoting the new Star Wars film, and the Dark Side livery for Garth Tander, and the Rebel livery for Russell Ingall and Jack Perkins. So they really came up good in the photos. I don't know about you if you've checked your photos yet, Baden, but they really did look good on track, didn't they?
Yeah, very aesthetically pleasing, and it must be said too that Adrian Burgess really did work overtime to embrace that philosophy of the Star Wars Chewbacca when we had our brief encounter with him
Oh,
in.
that was probably one of the, I guess, from a comical standpoint, that was probably one of the highlights of the weekend. We sort of bumped into Adrian Burgess there and said, "Oh, hey, Burjo, how's it going?" And he just sort of gave this Chewbacca-style grunt in which he's like,
New show with this man, Burjo's catchphrase, revive.
But even funnier, I guess, which we still keep talking about, is the ongoing saga with Greg Murphy. We keep thinking he's stalking us or whatever.
Where's Murph?
He keeps turning up wherever we go. We're crossing the bridge to get into the paddock, and he's standing there to one side. And then where were we? We're at the inside corner of turn one at the exit of the pit lane, and we're trying to film and take pictures of the Jamie Whincup pit stop. And who comes out of the garage but Murph? You know, he ruined my shot, and then it's just hilarious. Nothing
Yeah,
sinister. It's nothing sinister. It's just all a bit of fun and games, I think.
oh, absolutely. Clearly, he's performing a job at a very high level there, as Mark Scaife would say. He's in amongst the action, clearly trying to get right up with all the pits which were taking place, but added a little bit of an extra element to the weekend's proceedings for us.
Yeah, adding a bit of fun into there as well, and that's, I guess, in the end, we can just sum up by saying it was just a lot of fun pretty much in the end. It just reminded us of, why we are motorsport fans, and despite, all the ongoing negativity with Formula One, and I guess even people are still pretty bitter over V8 Supercars as switch over to pay TV as opposed to free to air. Just being trackside, being in amongst the fans, hearing the cars, all the action. I guess it just reminds you of why we are motorsport fans and why we love it, in comparison to perhaps other sports as well. I know you're a bit of a footy fan as well, and we do like watching a bit of cricket. But yeah, the reason why we're doing this podcast and why we did the whole film as well on the road trip was because we're motorsport fans. And anything, would you like to add anything to that as well before we wrap it up?
I think it's a pretty much spot on summation there. Clearly, the kind of events which you talk about dreaming to attend one day, and it's not really until you do make it there in person, and you just really just soak up that atmosphere and just get that sense, the aura which is associated with events such as this and the various Grand Prix across the globe, which we've been both of us lucky to attend in various venues throughout the years. But really for this one, it's a major goal ticked off that list. And you encourage all enthusiasts, if you're in doubt, and don't spend any more moments contemplating it, just make it happen, because really they're unforgettable memories.
Very much so, and for a lot of people, it's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. So if you can tick it off this early, I guess we're still fairly sprightly in that regard. If you can tick it off this early, then it always leaves room for you to go again and again and again. And obviously, there are a lot of fans who, I guess, live locally or even long distance who will make the journey every year, make the pilgrimage, because they are dedicated in that regard. But otherwise, we've got this we've got this road film that we've done, and hopefully it'll go into the editing room soon. And whenever, we'll keep keep you guys updated on what's happening with it. And definitely we want to share that with all you guys, the listeners and fans or whatever. So really looking forward to seeing how that comes out. But other than that, Baden, I don't think we have much more else we want to discuss. I think we've gone a little over time than what we originally promised.
Oh, well, there's never enough to discuss, really, and I'm sure in a week's time, when there's been a little bit of a break that can be enjoyed, having been pretty flat out, it must be said, since that weekend, just to digest everything, there'll be more more memories, which will be described on the next Wednesday edition. But beyond that, really, it's just nothing but the good times that were had.
Very much so, and from me, Jawad, I guess thank you for joining us today, and next week we will be back to the Wednesday time. Everything's been out of whack, ever since we've gone interstate and everything. But normal services to be resumed next week on Wednesday. Hopefully that'll be on location too. So other than that, me, Jawad, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you guys later.
Yeah.